I want to talk about the narrative when it comes to ICP. Now, nothing I say is financial advice, and clearly, I'm not telling anyone to do anything. This is just my personal perspective on this project currently. But I'm saying, when it comes to the narrative of ICP, why do I want to talk about it? Well, it's because I feel like even though, as of right now, ICP is around $4, and actually back then it was around $18 not too long ago, I actually like the narrative when it comes to the ICP right now better than back then. Because if I take a look at it back then, the internet computer, sure, it was known as kind of like this alternative, I would say, beyond like a Solana or something like a BNB chain, or maybe arguably to some extent something like Ethereum, Algorand, or something like that. But then the thing is, as of right now, I feel like the narrative when it comes to AI is a lot stronger than back then when it comes to ICP, because we have to take a look at, for instance, Caffeine AI. Literally in the name, there is AI. You know what I mean? Not to mention, when I take a look at just the concept of things being on chain and seeing the focus that the internet computer has when it comes to decentralized AI. It is just more so, I think, a little bit of a AI kind of narrative project right now when compared to back then, where it wasn't really kind of considered something like that. And I've seen time and time again where when there's pretty good sentiment when it comes to the altcoin space, I've seen some AI projects kind of historically do pretty okay. Not to say that hypothetically they could, but who knows, right? I mean, I'm just saying what I saw historically. And a lot of them are down as of right now, and who knows what they could do moving forward. But I'm just saying, I did see that historically. What will they do moving forward? I mean, I can't control that, but at the same time, when I take a look at something like ICP, I just feel like the narrative when it comes to AI is just a lot better than before, which I actually think is not such a bad thing when it comes to ICP, because back then I feel like the internet computer didn't really have this kind of thing where people could take a look at it and say, oh yeah, this kind of has the vibe of that. You know what I mean? Being a quote unquote alternative to Solana, Algorand, something like that, there's a lot of, those type of projects. The internet computer just being one of the many, right? It's nothing that is necessarily too kind of revolutionary. That's the way to take a look at it. So when I take a look at it as of right now, I feel like the narrative when it comes to it is arguably a lot better than back then in my perspective, even though it's not reflecting that when it comes to the charts. But I'm just saying, when it comes to the narrative, I think it's actually hypothetically better than back then. What will this do? If let's say there's that next leg up when it comes to the altcoin space, or if let's say arguably, hypothetically, maybe if we do ever see an altcoin season, I mean, I can't control that, but if something like ICP, which actually is not a small project by any means, right? The market cap is currently around 2 billion, but then actually the AI narrative became stronger. I don't know why I would be necessarily surprised if ICP did something, at least if let's say there was even a hypothetical altcoin season. This is my, again, mindset when it comes to this. Now, when it comes to ICP, people like to tell me, okay, well, why is it so cool being focused on AI, whereas other projects out there, a lot of them are focused on AI? Totally aware of that. Like, for instance, if I want to take a look at the Near protocol, like initially when I was believing in Near, the kind of narrative was that, hey, it's a project that has an aspect of sharding technology. Now, let me explain sharding technology first before I get into why I think this kind of relates to ICP later. Again, when it comes to sharding technology, what happens is that basically the network is split up into multiple sections known as shards, and workload on the network is distributed amongst these different shards, and as a result, it becomes very scalable. But then the thing is, if I take a look at the Near protocol as of right now, what do they describe themselves as, primarily speaking? As the blockchain for AI. You know what I mean? Before, it was kind of like, oh, sharding technology. But the thing is, the Near protocol is not the only project out there that has an aspect of sharding technology. And sharding technology, I don't think, is such a cool narrative, arguably right now, when compared to before. So the thing is, again, the Near protocol is literally changing their kind of whole, I would say, mindset, right? Arguably, at least from what I can see. From, yeah, sure, I mean, it still has an aspect of sharding, but then just even talking about how there's the blockchain for AI, right? That right there kind of showcases that even though that market sector is more competitive, it seems like the Near protocol might understand something about the trend. So if let's say something as massive as Near did that, is the, I think, hypothetically stronger narrative for AI when it comes to ICP currently when compared to back then such a bad thing? Arguably, I don't think so. This is my perspective. And again, when it comes to Near, they're kind of a project that did that when they're already massive. Like if we take a look at the Near protocol, it's still one of the most massive projects out there. It's not the biggest, but I'm saying it's still pretty recognizable. And they still did that. ICP, it's kind of doing that in a sense, arguably, I would say, just because I see what Dfinity did with something like Caffeine AI and all this. Just because of that, I kind of feel like it's kind of a little bit following in the footsteps of the Near protocol, in my perspective, in that sense, right? Again, in just that particular kind of thing, I would say, when it comes to the AI sort of narrative. So the way I take a look at it is that, again, I am a bigger fan of the narrative right now when compared to before. Now, $100, it's still around 25 times lower than that. I mean, ICP is around $4 currently, so it's not like it's doing the best, but I'm saying when it comes to, I would arguably say the better narrative when it comes to AI currently, and also on top of that, I think a more established project as well in terms of the recognizability. Not to mention, I take a look at kind of the strides that Dfinity did through Caffeine AI. When I take a look at all this type of stuff, and I hypothetically take a look at a make-believe idea of $100, which at that point, considering current circulating supply, market cap would be around 54 billion. I don't know if that's something that would necessarily make me so kind of, I would say, surprised if maybe that hypothetically in a make-believe scenario did happen. I mean, who knows, but I'm just saying, when I take a look at ICP with the amount of holders that it has, with the notoriety, and then with the arguably, I would say, improved narrative when compared to before, again, I just wouldn't necessarily be surprised. That's the way to take a look at it. Now, also on top of that, when it comes to ICP, it's still a top 50 project within this space. Like, sure, I mean, it hasn't really kind of done much lately, but still, it's pretty massive in the grand scheme of things. And at the same time, my point of view is that when it comes to other projects out there, they like to advertise in other ways, right? Like, let's say through a celebrity or through an athlete, which I think is pretty cool in some cases. However, when it comes to Dfinity, I like how they're putting their focus towards things that could actually improve the fundamentals of a project in some cases, because ICP already has arguably okay enough attention, right? I mean, again, it's a top 50 project. So does it really need to kind of do this or do that? I mean, who knows? But personally, I would much rather prefer kind of developing the fundamentals of the internet computer and also just kind of improving it, right? Nonetheless, which I do like what Dfinity is doing in that sense. Dfinity, I feel like could have easily taken other routes, right? Just kind of make maybe arguably ICP a little bit more recognizable through maybe advertisements in this area or whatever area. But at the same time, if they're putting that towards like actually developing the internet computer, I feel like it's something that I wouldn't necessarily find disappointing because it's already popular enough in my perspective. So yeah, I do like that when it comes to ICP. And again, when it comes to something like this, I'm just staying patient as of right now. Just dollar cost averaging once a month, and that's pretty much about it. But I still like the narrative because I just want to stay prepared because if let's say there's hypothetically an altcoin season, who knows? I don't necessarily want to kind of not be a part of that journey. But who knows? Again, only time will tell. I'm just staying patient currently and just waiting. I mean, that's all I can do actually. However, I want to say thank you for watching. I hope you'll have a nice day. It's been Lee the Captain. I'm out. Peace. Bye.